I'm amazed by the number of people here who are not disaffected Republicans, but are coming, which is obviously the traditional route to libertarianism. You know, you're a Republican who really believes it, you wake up in the morning and realize your party really doesn't believe it, you look for someone who does, and you wind up on the libertarian side. There are a lot of people here who didn't go that route, who came here from other ideological places.
Surprised many anti-war liberals, I guess there are.
Yeah, there are anti-war liberals. There are people who, I mean, my experience is this. You almost always hear people say, well, it's not a question of left versus right. Well, actually, it almost always is a question of left versus right. I mean, almost any issue, public policy issue, does cleave down traditional left versus right lines. This is the only place I've ever been where there really are people who can't be explained by reference to left versus right. They really are sort of from somewhere else. It's interesting. Well, because he's a threat, of course. I mean, look, I mean, I think there are some Republicans who have principal differences with Ron Paul, who think his foreign policy is reckless, for instance, or who think the gold standard is impractical or crackpot. I mean, and it's fair to believe that as far as I'm concerned. I have questions about his foreign policy and disagree with it to some extent. But at the party leadership level, they don't like Ron Paul because he calls them out for being the phonies they are. The appeal of Ron Paul, there's like a basic contradiction that's central to his appeal, okay? Ron Paul is appealing because he refuses to lead, because he refuses to command. He refuses to tell other people what to do. It's not just ideological, it's temperamental. Like, that's who he is as a person, and he can't help it. And so Ron Paul will never get up and say, you do this, you follow me. That's not who he is. And that's why people like him. But because that's not who, I mean, you have to be that guy in order to organize an efficient movement. Yeah, I don't think of this in normal political terms. You know, is this a movement? If so, where does it go from here? I think the whole purpose of it is to inform the rest of the country that there are people who are committed to a non-authoritarian, non-dictatorial worldview, and that they're not crazy, or at least not all of them are crazy, and you know, they're worth listening to. Well, they don't understand it at all, of course. Though, I must say, I think Paul is treated with more affection than you would expect. Mostly because I think most people who cover politics don't have any idea what he's really saying, or the implications of it. For another, describing yourself as libertarian is like an easy way not to be a Republican for a lot of people, because it's so embarrassing to say, I'm a Republican who voted for Bush, but you're kind of conservative, so you don't want to identify with the Democrats, so you say, I'm a libertarian. You know, it's a kind of port in a storm for a lot of people, and an socially accepted dodge. And I think that's the way it's seen by a lot of people in the press. So it's like, Ron Paul, you know, he's kind of harmless, seems like a nice guy. You know, he's for smoking weed. You know, I'm for him. Or I'm not against him. I don't think he's scary. He's not Pat Buchanan 92 or something. You know, someone who's really reviled by journalists, by the lifestyle liberals, the know-nothings who run America's networks.
Well, he's not the leader of a movement, do you think? Have you gotten the sense there's any issue, anything he talks about that he's actually moved the discussion forward on for this campaign? Or is it...
Well, I'm struck by, this is not a particularly resonant issue for me, though. I'm not making fun of it, but it doesn't move me to tears or laughter. But the Federal Reserve stuff has remarkable resonance with other people. I mean, it's unbelievable. The number of people I've interviewed, Ron Paul fans, who say, you know, it's the gold standard that got me here, which is not something you would expect. When I did this story about Ron Paul for the New Republican, that was the number one most surprising thing I learned, was the seriousness with which people sort of take the Federal Reserve. I mean, and they should. I'm not mocking it in any way. I'm just saying I didn't expect it. You know, you would expect people would be like, well, I want to smoke pot, I'm libertarian, or, you know, I've got an unusual sexual proclivity, I'm libertarian. No, these are like people who care about this very abstract, pretty complicated issue of monetary policy.
Did you look into it once you heard it?
I did actually look into it. I did, and I'm not sure I'm a deep enough person or have a solid enough grounding in economics to fully appreciate it, but I certainly didn't dismiss it as crazy at all.
Do you think it's as you're saying, it's an easy dodge to say I'm a libertarian more than I'm a Republican? Do you think the whole campaign made it even easier to say that? Is the brand...
No, I don't. I think actually Ron Paul challenged the Republican Party pretty directly and pretty aggressively and offended a lot of partisan Republicans. Good for him, by the way, in my view. But no, I think he put a kind of harder edge on it, a more anti-Republican edge on it. I mean, when I was growing up, the libertarians, at least in Southern California where I'm from, libertarians were they were sort of sympathetic to the Republicans, kind of. I mean, the Republican Party was different then too, but now I think there's more hostility.
You're going to vote for it?
I have no clue. I sometimes don't vote because I have my own set of crackpot criteria for voting that I'm not going to impose upon you by describing them, but I will just say, I mean, I've got my own theories about it, and so sometimes I don't vote, and no, I don't feel bad about voting, and yes, I still feel entitled to complain even though I don't vote.
So you understand people who after this would say, screw it, we're going to write Ron Paul's name.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a big believer in voting your conscience. I think a vote is an endorsement. I don't think it's something to be done lightly. I don't think you should vote for things you sort of agree with. At least that's how I feel. I mean, I don't judge other people's criteria, but mine is, I feel like a vote is a pretty significant act. And, there are all kinds of things I don't vote on. I live in Washington, D.C., and there are all sorts of things I don't understand or candidates I never heard of. I'm sure they're all awful anyway, but I often don't vote.
Yeah, there's a ton of groups here. You're here. There's John Burns Society who's out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Rockwell up there. Barry Gold, the former congressman's going to speak. It seems like Paul gets away pretty easily with getting all these weird groups that, as you said, in '96, but have been fringe groups that make them scary.
Right.
Just allowed in this big circus. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's kind of the genius and the pitfall, the basic pitfall of what Ron Paul has done. I mean, it's such a loose affiliation of groups. It's sort of anybody who kind of wants to join can, and that's a great thing. But maybe in the long term, not a great organizing principle for a political movement. I don't know. I'm not a political scientist, but his temperament allows that. I mean, I remember, saying when I was riding around with him for this story, well, gee, I think that sounds like a very bad idea. To something an opinion he offered, and he said, well, it's okay. Not everyone has to agree. I mean, whatever the opposite of a cult of personality is, that's what he seeks to create. It's like, no, you don't have to sign up with everything I believe. I don't take it personally. I like that. That's nice. No. Look, libertarianism, in my view, cuts against human nature pretty dramatically. Half of it is really appealing, the half that says I can do pretty much whatever I want. But the other half, that other people ought to be allowed to do pretty much whatever they want, even if they're annoying to me and on the wrong course as far as I'm concerned, that's deeply unappealing to people. People intrinsically want to control other people's behavior. And they figure out all kinds of justifications. Well, I know what's best. Oh no, don't do that, you'll get hurt. Or, I've done that before, that's a bad idea. Or, if you were only smart enough or as smart as I am, you would see this. Whatever justification they offer, they have a natural desire, almost all of them, to control other people. And that's, contrary to the basic tenet of libertarianism. So it's very easy for people to say, I'm a libertarian. Yeah, I think everyone should do what he wants. Meaning, me. Yeah, no, so I don't ever think, I'm sorry, I know that you all are a libertarian organization, and I support Reason, and I sincerely do. I read it. I'm a Nick Gillespie fan. I've been a lifelong self-identified libertarian. I don't think that most people will ever get there. Ever. Sorry. You have two choices. You can vote for the Republican or the Democrat. Let's be real. No one else is getting elected. And, vote for the lesser of two evils. I think that's an adult argument. I don't agree with it, but I think it's fair.
What do you think of Sarah Palin?
Sarah Palin hunts and fishes. Okay? So as a sportsman, I have a profound emotional attachment to Sarah Palin that a Reason doesn't touch. In other words, you could tell me that Sarah Palin, had breakfast with Satan last week at the Four Seasons, and it wouldn't really damage my love for her because she caught a 30-pound sockeye salmon herself. That's how I feel about it.